Here at RUSI, we speak to around 8,500 students who are in professional military education every year. 18 staff colleges around the world in everything from a single lecture to a 2-week long work package. And on themes as diverse as Great Pack Competition, the future of alliances, or hybrid warfare, active measures, the deep battle, or the reality of contemporary conflict. We have a special relationship with Ecole de Guerre. In Paris, the students don't have a deeply intensive laid out syllabus which they've got to crack through during that year. They do that work before they get to the college. And as a result, the year they spend in Paris, they look at topics which are designed to exercise their intellect, to extend their idea of concepts of doctrine, to change how they think about great problems. We've been privileged over the past 3 years to set them a series of challenges every year, and in conjunction with the English department there, the students spend their year looking at a selection of topics that we give them and deciding to write a dissertation, thesis on one of those topics. The topics we select aren't necessarily those that are around the big issues of the day. They're not even necessarily over the big issues over the next 2 to 3 years. But they are issues and challenges that we think need looking at. They're issues that might extend to 20 or 30 years out. They're conceptual and they're designed to stretch them intellectually, to bring something else to bear as they go into the next parts of their careers. Now, normally, at the culmination of their presentations, at the end of their academic year, the students present their findings and their paper to a panel who then challenge them, question them, and generally dig into some of the detail that sits behind it to really push them and challenge some of the debating skills. And again, they do this in English. What's even better is that we found that we have the support of both Vice Chiefs of Defence Staff from the UK and France who make their way to London to RUSI and join these sessions, each of which has been fascinating, challenging and insightful. This year, of course, that wasn't possible. It wasn't possible for the students to come to London to present or to bring people into a big room to do the challenge sessions. So we did it virtually. And we weren't able to bring a whole variety of others to come and view what they saw. So instead, we did it virtually. And the attached presentations that you can see in the following clips are the findings of the students and their papers. The students are really to be congratulated for what they have delivered. It's quite astounding not only that they've achieved this in a year, but in a second language and delivered a paper as well as a compelling and good presentation at the end of it. The whole range of topics that we gave them for the last year were everything from the reliance on logistics, proxies in space, the morphing of cyber and space challenges, contested theatre entry. But perhaps the two most interesting presentations that you'll see were on, firstly, the concept of parity in military terms, and secondly, the changing rules of warfare and what they mean for the future. The students of both of these presentations really excelled themselves, and we're really grateful to the support from Rob Johnson at CCW and numerous others who helped them through what is a difficult intellectual period for them. We really enjoyed working with them and hope you enjoy the presentations that follow. Thanks very much for watching. The most challenging presentation that we gave the students from Ecole de Guerre this year was on the topic of parity, something first raised by Rob Johnson at a RUSI Land Warfare conference a few years ago. Most Western militaries accept that they must adapt to an era of long-term strategic competition spanning the spectrum of conflict. Shortened warning time linked to unpredictable actors is likely to lead to a period of markedly increased instability. Adversaries seem more numerous, less constrained by national caveats and rules, faster at making decisions, and have achieved technological parity on the battlefield, in some cases having technological superiority in some fields over allies. Partners seem less committed than previously, publics are less engaged, and certainty over political commitment is much reduced. Potential enemies has shifted doctrines to one of offense rather than defense, leaving Western forces reactive rather than being able to take the initiative. If military commanders acknowledge the issues associated with a lack of scale to defeat a superior and more numerous foe, they also now need to acknowledge that commercial and technological parity is all but certain on the battlefield. Does the concept of parity have historical precedence? And what could those lessons tell us about the future of conflict? Is parity only an operational and tactical issue, or is there something more strategic about it which needs a wider, more systemic approach from the West? The single group from Ecole de Guerre that tackled this subject did exceptionally well. It was my favourite paper of the year, and I think they did some really clear and deep thinking to come to their own research question that tackled this topic. Most difficultly, even the idea of parity has no real equivalence in the French language, so it posed an additional challenge for them. It was an exceptional paper, which we hope to publish later this year.
I'm Major Jérémie Guilbeault, and with my fellow comrade, Major Paul Lacombe, we will present you briefly our paperwork about parity as a military concept. In fact, this was the initial wording of the study. We chose another one, as you can read. Parity as a statement of fact, recommendations for enhanced strategic thinking. So it was a very challenging thinking about a concept that is used in various contexts and meanings, but that can also be very useful today for strategic thinking, focusing on France and Great Britain. A very interesting point is that there is no word in French to convey the idea of parity, such as in English. This helps us to consider differently French concepts. We ask ourselves the following questions: where this concept of parity comes from, how it is actually a key aspect of our relation towards other countries, why and how should we integrate it in strategic thinking. Parity has not been a subject often in the history of strategy. Initially, it will refer to facts and figures in the idea of balance of power. It is mainly a mathematical perception of confrontation. In fact, it is essential to integrate time and perceptions. There are no clear occurrences of any parity concept in the military because you only win when you actually manage to be superior. For members of military think tanks and staffs, parity has always been a perilous situation in which they do not want to go in at any cost. At least, they would have to go out of this hazardous situation as fast as possible in order to gain, once again, superiority. It remains true that parity is not something you are aiming at. It is a situation in which you find yourself. Parity has been considered in the relation between states as an equality between states, which do not exist in reality. This is a legal fiction that quite often hampers a realistic conception of the relation between states. Another mistake is to consider parity as the opposite of superiority. The opposite of superiority is inferiority. Parity is a gray zone with lots of uncertainty. At last, Western countries usually look for definitive end states. They want to achieve their victories with a preference for decisive battles. In fact, the competition never lasts. To sum up, parity can be a way to describe a situation as it is, not as we would like it to be. So, parity, a statement of fact. We have to admit that parity is a situation you meet when you are not winning. That occurs quite often. No more hegemonies, just challengers. Since the end of the Cold War, Western armies have assessed they were the most powerful ones on the battlefield. They can rely on technological assets with the United States as a leader. Moreover, they belong to the oldest and strongest military alliance, NATO. Some countries, such as Russia or China, have reason to challenge Western armies' preeminence. We have to reconsider our competitors, previously thought to be weaker, but who somehow succeeded in reaching a parity situation. Moreover, conflict and little wars, we have to reconsider it. No victory means defeat. Recent operations in which France or Great Britain were involved are considered failures. Not because their opponents won, but because France and Great Britain did not achieve their objectives. With the exception of Bosnian conflict, they have been entangled in endless conflicts in Middle East or Africa. Winning peace may be more difficult than winning battles in this context. At last, a technological superiority is not enough to guarantee superiority. Western countries may have some advantages through superior technology, but technological assets without strategy do not guarantee superiority. Altogether, technology can help developed countries as well as insurgents. Through a smart use of the means available to them, cyber, UAV, unmade explosives, competitors, such insurgents in the Middle East, can put themselves on par with Western countries. Therefore, we must admit that we are not that superior, and that situation is in fact parity. We are challenged in many ways, in many places.
So what should we do? First, how to adapt to a competitive world by denying and disrupting. First, France and Great Britain often consider themselves as mid-powers that need to fight to keep their rank. Denying and disrupting is in fact much easier than achieving. Our opponents often act that way, and we should also learn to act too in this more offensive way. It does not mean that we will be looking for destabilizing the international system, but more like ensuring stability through the adaptation of strategy. We must accept that the end state may not be peace, but another situation that we must accept. It is something about being realistic about the fact that competition is a never-ending process. The end state is not peace, but another step in the struggle. We should also adapt threats and go back to the theoretical roots of deterrence. All preparation of war was actually considered as part of deterrence. Yet it is not only a question of real superiority, but mainly a matter of perception, showing oneself stronger and more determined than he is really. Before and throughout any war, we need to frighten our opponents. The ideal being that it is sufficient to make him give up using his weapons. A key objective of deterrence is to restrain the enemy. In France especially, it is strategic thinking that have been inhibited through the confiscation of the concept of deterrence by nuclear deterrence. Actually, it did not prevent the seizure of Crimea by Russia. It's because we lack the right tools and the credibility. We need to reconsider our conception of deterrence so that it's an effective deterrence, nuclear and conventional together. And this is exactly what French President Macron told in February 2020 when he said that both systems should shoulder each other. How to prepare for tomorrow's wars? Wield, shield, and sword together. The building of a coherent and solid defense system is based on the preparation of war. Facing the return of the strength, we must get ready to face more and different threats, and we must anticipate them. We must stop trying to establish parity with our friends, for example, by comparing the numbers of meals within Europe. It has too often been an easy way to justify the budget cuts. We must therefore keep and develop our strategic capacity to act through the solidity of our institutions, deciding and acting, our defense tool, training and skills, our defense industries tailored to answer to our needs, and our population resilient. Obviously, that is possible if there is a coherent political vision. So parity is a statement of fact and cannot be considered as a course of action. Acknowledging parity as a statement of fact is the first step for an enhanced strategic thinking.